Album at 5. Here's Kevin and Tom on 760 WJR.
Yeah, there is a new sheriff in town. That's what Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida said yesterday when he signed a bill that turned that whole area where Disney World sits back over to state authority. DeSantis basically said the woke Disney Corporation has been given far too much latitude with no accountability for several decades, and it's time they act like everyone else, every other business in his state. So Disney World, Kevin, has now essentially gone from its own little kingdom, its entire territory, to being subject again to Florida law.
Yeah, it's like its own little state, Tom. It's a massive property, 27,000 acres. It has a staggering budget. It was run basically like its own state, its own entity. They had the ability to levy taxes, issue bonds. They exert control over public services like police and fire departments. You know, if they wanted to, they could have built their own nuclear power plant there. They haven't done that. Well, now the Mouse House will be a part of Florida, and that means huge changes for Disney and for Florida. Ron DeSantis, you mentioned the governor there, he tweeted this out. I signed legislation to end Disney's self-governing status. I placed the area in state receivership and appointed 5 members to a state control board. Disney no longer has its own government, will live under the same laws as everyone else, and pay its debts and fair share of taxes. Joining us now is David Dulio, Distinguished Professor of Political Science Department and Director of the Center for Civic Engagement at Oakland University. Good morning, David. How are you?
I'm well, guys. Good morning.
This was not a small step that Governor DeSantis made. This was a massive decision with major implications. Politically, first, how do you see this playing out? Will everybody in Florida love the fact that they did this, or will people be concerned that he did this?
Well, I think that you'll see mixed reaction in Florida just because this is going to be interpreted through the lens of the ongoing culture wars, and you know, we have to remember that this dates back at least a year or so when Disney sort of waded into some of the issues that were bubbling up in federal politics from time to time, and the governor didn't like it then, and he threatened to take this step, and he followed through with it. But, you know, to your question, not everybody's going to like it, because it seems like in politics today, when you make a decision, when anybody makes a decision, it pisses off half the country. But I think, you know, given the governor's really big electoral victory in the fall, in his reelection, you know, he's on some pretty solid political footing. I also think that this will play very well in the lead up to the Republican presidential primary, which everybody's just waiting for him to announce for. So I think this was not an off the cuff decision. This was well calculated.
Yeah, I think he feels comfortable in his decision to go after wokeness. It's very clear based on his press conferences that he has, but ultimately voters think about their pocketbooks, and while Disney will pay taxes now, the state of Florida is going to be on the hook for a lot of costs as well, infrastructure and things like that. DeSantis said this isn't going to cost taxpayers money. If it does that change how people will look at this decision, how they'll look at DeSantis, or not really?
Well, I think that's a vulnerability, right? And I think that they have his political team and his advisors have certainly weighed that in their calculation on whether to take the step or not. I also think that it's not going to be up to the governor to sort of fill those holes, if you will, right? The legislature in Florida is going to write the budget. The governor will sign it into law, but you know, they're the ones that are going to be tasked with sort of fixing the details of this, if you will.
You know, it was about, if this was 20 years ago, the climate has changed so much in that state. This might not have worked back then because Disney was really a major reason why people went to Florida. But the times have changed. People are now attracted to Florida because of its way of life. And this now seemingly great contrast between Florida and a lot of other states. Has Disney itself, have they lost a lot of their political clout there in Florida and their political strength to have allowed this now switch in policy?
Boy, Tom, that's a great question. And the straight answer is I don't know. I'd love to see some polling on that in terms of Disney's sort of strength of brand, even and maybe favorability ratings. I would bet that they have, and I have no evidence to back me up on this, but I think it's a fine assertion, right? That their standing has gone down, whether it's because of taking particular positions on issues that folks think should remain in politics, or Kevin mentioned before that it's not cheap to go there, and I think people have watched the prices tick up on that year after year, and that might sour some folks.
Yeah, this all stemmed from this characterization of that Florida law. In this particular instance, Disney, it seems, kind of picked this fight, didn't they? Because they were incredibly critical of Florida's bill that would prohibit teaching sexuality for kindergarten through third grade. And they jumped on the bandwagon, calling this the Don't Say Gay bill, which Ron DeSantis says is a gross mischaracterization. Do you think at this point that Disney kind of regrets, and maybe more corporations are regretting to a certain degree, of getting so intimately involved in the political discourse?
Well, I think this is one of the first instances that I can think of that we've seen a real sort of blowback or pushback, right, with real consequences and teeth. The other criticisms that have come corporations' way have been rhetorical in nature, but this is a concrete step that is, as you both mentioned, right, is not unsubstantial, right? It's a big deal. So I think we may see more of that depending on the state in which a corporation operates and what the government looks like in that state. But I think I've seen some reports in the last couple of weeks that maybe corporations are starting to take a step away from that, and maybe it's from signals like this that, hey, look, if you sort of dip your toe in the waters, there might be a shark under there that's going to bite it off. Yeah,
for sure. It's funny because his argument, Ron DeSantis, was essentially this, to Disney, that you're not required to abide by Florida law, right? Yet you're sitting there commenting on Florida law and criticizing it heavily and mischaracterizing it. Well, at the same time, the state of Florida was subsidizing Disney by giving them these enormous tax breaks. Do you think, maybe politically, or if your analysis on this, was the governor right to do this? I mean, just say, listen, you're sitting in the state of Florida, you're living high off the hog from the state, do your own thing, doing your own thing, you're still criticizing us? The deal is over from 60 years ago. Was that the right move?
Well, I think that there's a couple different angles on this. One is the so-called corporate welfare decisions that get made, and we see this all over the place in with economic development, right? Where certain industries or companies are given tax breaks and different benefits from the state. But I also think too that look, I mean, the folks that work at Disney, even the company itself, they can say whatever they want, right? They have First Amendment rights. They can say, and some would argue corporations don't have those, but the Supreme Court's pretty clear on that. They can say what they want, but other people can respond in a way that they want. And here's the governor of Florida that did just that.
Yeah, you can say whatever you want. Doesn't mean there's not going to be consequences, but it is a free country, and everyone has that right. First Amendment right in the Constitution. Dave Dulio, director of the Center for Civic Engagement and political science professor at Oakland University. Always great to have you, Dave. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me, guys. Have a good day.
All right, you too. 800-859-0957 is the phone number. 800-859-0WJ.